Welcome back to the second part of our podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com, discussing targets for North Carolina's class of 2023. You're also watching us on our YouTube channel, which is called Tar Heel Illustrated. I am THI publisher Andrew Jones, and joining me is our director of football recruiting, Miss Deana King. And if you missed it, check it out on our site, TarHeelIllustrated.com, or our YouTube channel, Tar Heel Illustrated. Our first part of this series, where we're diving deep into the class of 2023, because last week, the class of 2022, 17 members signed their letters of intent with North Carolina. So now we're pinning our ears back and we're going straight ahead, full force ahead there, full throttle ahead, Deana, with the class of 2023. What we're going to do is take a look at some position groups, some of the kids in some position groups, and kind of move forward. If you missed the first one, we kind of went into a little bit more in depth about how big we think the class will be, why, and a couple other things. We'll hit on that with this one as well, in case you happen to miss that first one. Dean and I both believe this will be a larger class than the 17 that signed in 2022. And we've kind of thought all along 23 would be a larger class. For a while, we thought, hey, maybe 25, but I'm not sure Mac's ever going to sign 25 now, just because roster management issues and transfer portal stuff. And they picked up 4 kids, in a sense, that are part of the roster management crunch using the extra year. British Brooks, Brian Anderson, Kieran Johnson, all using that extra year allowed by the NCAA. And they brought in from the transfer portal, Corey Gaynor, offensive lineman from Miami. So, Deana, very quickly before we talk about individual players in the class of 23, what are your thoughts about the defensive prospects in the class of 23?
Well, kind of like we discussed in the offense, the net probably is going to be thrown out a little bit more larger, because the possibility of getting more spots. Last year it was like 14 for a while. And then after they got to 14, the $1 million question is, okay, how many more? And they signed 17 the early signing day. So will they sign any in February? Who knows? They got a few targets. We'll see. But defensively, a lot of great kids. I feel like the secondary is pretty good in the 23 class, and we'll discuss some of these later on in this podcast.
Also, keep an eye on Phoenix City, Alabama, for some of the big time kids in this class that on the defensive side of the ball that Carolina is pursuing. One of those players we'll talk about in a little while. He's in the secondary, and you're getting to know that situation quite well. So let's begin up front in the trenches with Keith Sampson, a 3-star kid, 6'3", 285 pounds, from New Bern High School here in North Carolina, the number 16 player nationally at his position, number 8 in North Carolina. Keith Sampson is someone I think a lot of fans have been aware of, been familiar with for a while now.
There's nobody in, I'm going to say the state, that works as hard as Keith Sampson. If there was a camp or combine anywhere in this state, neighboring state, or anywhere in the region, Keith Sampson was there. I mean, that kid was, him and his dad was on the road all year. During the off season, after the spring football season was over, they were there. I mean, it was just fun trying to keep up with him on social media, because he was trying to fit in unofficial visits and taking in camps and everything. But his work ethic is tremendous. And so he's from New Bern. New Bern's had a few Tar Heels to come to Chapel Hill, and he grew up knowing kind of, you know, how little kids are looking up to some of those guys. I believe Brian Simmons was a linebacker at New Bern that Keith idolized, and was a big player at UNC in wasn't he with the Bengals, I believe?
Yeah, played quite a while in the NFL too. Yeah. Had a nice career.
And the Tar Heels,
and he's now
radio guy now.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but yeah, KJ, I'll call him KJ because he's actually a junior, Keith Sampson Jr.
And don't a lot of people call him KJ anyway? Don't a lot of people that know him call him KJ? Yeah. Like some people actually refer to him as KJ Sampson.
Mm-hmm. And so he's one that looking at, because he's despite being a 3-star, he dropped some, which that's other people's evaluations, but I've always had a really high perception of him on the field. I mean, he's every camp that I went to personally, he dominated. I mean, basically they almost had to say, KJ, we know, let some other guys have some reps, that's the competitor he is. So just Eastern North Carolina kid, Carolina's going to be involved. State, East Carolina's really heavy on him. Virginia Tech, South Carolina, Georgia, the usual folks. Ohio State, he went up there, I believe, this spring and summer for camp and a visit. So he's a good guy, good kid, and I can't stress the work. He's Coach Cross would just really love him. Let's get to work,
Football coaches want kids who are passionate, and clearly he's passionate. Justin Benton is a 4-star kid, 6'2", 255 pounds. IMG Academy in Bradenton. You're going to hear that a few times here in this podcast. The number 45 overall prospect in the class of 2023 nationally, number 11 in his position. And we're going to, the IMG kids are included in Florida because that's where they go to school, but it's a national program. They play a national schedule. And I like to think about these kids being where they're actually from, but he is listed as the number 41 prospect in Florida. And for those of you who don't know, Florida puts out at least 100, FBS kids a year, pretty much. They put out a ton of kids. So your thoughts on Justin Benton, whom I don't know a whole lot about. So you're going to have to fill me in a little bit here.
IMG, basically a small, well, I mean, at college, I mean, they're loaded. I mean, at every position. I mean, you just look at their starters and you can just name the schools that they go to. Benton came out, I believe, with a top list that North Carolina came out with. And anytime you can get a kid that's there at IMG, he's going to be really good and play a lot of good competition. So huge kid. They're needing some help on the defensive line because, right now we still don't know who's going to be staying or moving on. And some of the, they took only one defensive tackle in 22 in Travis Shaw. So they're going to have to look at that class to 23 class to get some defensive tackles in there.
Especially the way that you layer classes and layer a program, which is another reason why we think this is going to be a larger class, because as of right now, 22 is a little bit smaller, and you want to be old, but you also want to be young. You want to be young so you have that growing foundation underneath you. They just continue to move up and get a little bit older. That's how programs are able to reload instead of rebuild, and that is part of the method here. So a guy like Justin Benton could be a part of that process. I think Tamarion Parker, I mentioned Phoenix City, Alabama. Tamarion Parker clearly would be somebody that would fit into that process quite well. 6'4", 256 pounds, Phoenix City, Alabama, Central High School there. Keep in mind that name. He is the number 156 player nationally in the class, number 17 in his position, which is loaded in this class, and also the number 15 prospect in Alabama. By the way, Alabama is really skyrocketed on the list of states that are producing a ton of kids, especially when you look at it per capita. So what are your thoughts about Tamarion Parker, which is a name I have heard for quite some time, and I think most people listening have as well?
His high school played Connor Harrell in the 7A state championship in Alabama, and Tamarion's been at UNC. He was there at one of the camps, over the spring, summer. I remember him coming up. I believe he came up for a game, and just recently, one of these guys that loves Twitter asking where all of his Tar Heel fans were. And of course, the Tar Heel Nation fan base, they start retweeting. Found it kind of cool that Connor Harrell retweeted him and put Bama and the arrow mark UNC, kind of like the trademark VA to NC that the Virginia kids kind of had this past year. So Carolina's looking in that Alabama region a lot here recently, and there's some more kids we'll talk about later in the podcast. But like you said, Alabama is going to be may sneak in the blueprint here. The blueprints from Washington to down into Atlanta and the Georgia, but they will go out, and we've seen them go out, and the blueprint. So Tamarion is a really good player that really likes North Carolina, and I see Carolina being in his top list.
Well, Eastern Alabama is not terribly far from Atlanta, and they hit Atlanta hard. A lot of people hit Atlanta hard. So the eastern half of Alabama certainly it's like in baseball. Sometimes the home plate umpire, they give Greg Maddux the black on the plate. And early on in the game, well, they're giving him the black. Like the black on the plate in baseball is kind of like the eastern half of Alabama in this footprint. Rico Walker is smack dab in the middle of the footprint from Hickory, North Carolina, 6'4", 215 pounds, a four-star kid. Everybody watching this knows who Rico Walker is. We've talked about him multiple times. You have seen him in person many times. You've communicated with him many times. He is the number 207 overall prospect nationally in the class, number 13 at his position, number 3 in North Carolina, listed as a defensive end, but I think is another kid that could kind of bounce around. You show up and end up somewhere else in a matter of time because he's such a great athlete. So tell everybody how much you love about Rico as an athlete, and what do you think about his situation right now?
It seems like I've been covering Rico forever.
It's like finally his class is here. To be honest with you,
he's still a junior though.
Yeah, I think I incorrectly did something back in the summer, and I cut line underneath a photo called him class of 22 because we've been talking about him so long.
First time I saw him was at those BTO Sports regional combines that I was a big part of, and he was down at the one in Matthews, and at that time very quickly, that was during the heart of the pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. In 20, because they didn't have any 2019 because there was no high school football season in North Carolina that fall. It went over to the spring in 2020, but at that time he was still trying to figure out. Well, I know what he wanted to play, but staffs and everything was telling him, you might need to look at this position. But at that camp, he was playing wide receiver.
Yeah, wide receiver.
He's just a natural athlete. He was out there doing really good at that. And once he got into these team camps and going to these colleges and them kind of suggesting him, hey, you need to look at this and everything, because he kept telling me, he's like, well, they're recruiting me at this, but I really want to play wide receiver. But, sometimes more experienced heads can tell those younger folks, hey, if you want to play at the next level, let's go this route. So now he's at defensive end and playing at Hickory, who is, in the Western foothills, that place that, North Carolina's not had a lot of great luck at. Would be a huge pickup to get Rico, but he played a little bit of a tight end. So he does have those skills, and he's like this brand that Mac likes to recruit, a kid that can play multiple positions. I mean, there's been kids come in at UNC one position and end up at another. And So, but North Carolina was in on him early. His dad played at Auburn, so naturally he's got a lot of love for the Southeastern Conference. And I do believe this is going to come down to possibly these Southeastern Conference schools that majorly like Tennessee, who his dad has a relationship with one of the coaches up there, and then North Carolina and NC State. I mean, all those schools are putting a priority on Rico.
Jordan Hall is a 4-star linebacker as we go into the linebackers, 6'3", 228. Now, for a junior in high school to play linebacker at 6'3", 228 is pretty significant. But then let's keep in mind he plays for a mini college, which is called IMG Academy down in Bradenton, Florida. The number 178 overall prospect nationally in the class. He's the number 31 kid in Loaded, Florida. So I don't know a whole lot about Jordan Hall, so educate me on this young man.
Well, you said a lot. He's got prototypical linebacker size, and he's getting a lot of good quality competition against IMG. Like I said before, it's like a mini college. I've been down there. I went back in 2020 at that campus, and I can see why Armando Baycott went down there. I mean, you're right there on the bay, and just tremendous. Can't stress the facilities they have down there. I've never seen as many football fields, golf course.
They got everything, they specialize in every sport just about.
It's like they got. I mean, the kids stay on campus like college. They had a whole own hotel that we stayed at. Had a big interest. It's like we was going in to a small college. But back to him. I mean, he's a good ball player. I mean, he's got a great offer list, and North Carolina offered him, and they haven't offered many linebackers, so they've been very selective. So Coach Thigpen must really like him, because he kind of makes me think of the way Thigpen did Sebastian Cheeks, going outside of the blueprint and going to get an elite kid.
Some similarities physically between Jordan Hall and Sebastian Cheeks as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
AJ Harris, Phoenix City. We were talking about Phoenix City a few minutes ago. AJ Harris, well, he's one of the biggest names nationally in the class. He's a 4-star kid. Got to be borderline 5-star, I would think, at this point. 6'1", 183 pounds. Like I said, from Phoenix City, Alabama. The number 20 overall prospect nationally, number 2 at his position, number 1 in the state of Alabama. So we've already discussed the top player in Virginia, top player in North Carolina, top player in South Carolina, top player now in Alabama. And we have one of the top player in Georgia at his position coming up here in a few minutes. So Central High School, along with Tamarion Parker. How does anybody move the ball against that team with those two kids on defense? Connor Harrell did, which is why he needs to be a 4-star, right? So what do you know about AJ Harris? I know before you answer that, just to let everybody know, you've gotten, I wouldn't say embedded in that situation, but you are embedding yourself as each layer of communication occurs. You're getting to know that situation pretty well. So what's up with him and the interest he could have in North Carolina?
He came for a visit against Wake Forest and South Carolina beat Wake Forest. Pardon me.
And saw a defense that maybe could use him in that day. That was not UNC's best day defensively, but he got a chance to see what it looks like against the pass, right?
Yeah. So he got to see how Carolina would play against a passing team, but he at that time when I interviewed him afterwards, they not sure when. He was really close to setting a date, and his dad told me a couple of dates. December 13th was his mom's birthday, but they decided to wait, and he's going to announce in January, and their thought process is waiting to see who signed in early February, early signing day in December, and then see what happens in this transfer portal. Not that they're concerned with AJ competing. They just like to see what's in front of them. And Carolina made his top 7 list. So they're right in the thick of it with like these other big time recruitments with Zach Rice and Travis Shaw. They're battling the Alabamas, the Clemsons, the Ohio States of the world. So I do know that North Carolina and the coaching staff, Coach Brown, Coach Bly, all those, they have made a big statement to the Harris family. I mean, they just compliment the UNC staff a lot, and they could land I told you the night that I interviewed AJ's dad, Daniel, that they're looking at it at a bigger picture because AJ wants to, I believe, major in business, so entrepreneur and stuff like that. So they're basing it on this 40-year decision, and they know North Carolina has a great national brand. He is from Alabama, but he's a military kid, so he's not Alabama's where he is now. He's been kind of all over the map. These military kids that they go from one place. There's no really tie to a state. So
they're doing their due diligence.
So the point of, he's from Alabama, he's a lock. No, it's not necessarily.
Yeah, they're doing their due diligence. The thing that really impressed me, that's what you told me about him, is that they must have like a massive checklist about things, and they're going through it.
Yeah,
and they're checking off certain things, and maybe some things they aren't. And from what we understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, I guess I'm speaking for you a little bit, Carolina checks off a lot of those boxes.
Yeah, they told me that. I mean, they have, and I think from their inner circle, they feel very trustworthy. They're very trusting of this staff, and would be very comfortable if AJ picked UNC with Coach Brown and his staff. If
Braylon Johnson is a 3-star corner back, and by the way, AJ Harris is a cornerback. Braylon Johnson, 6 foot, 155 pounds, Highland Springs, Virginia, the number 59 corner nationally, number 11 prospect in the state of Virginia. We saw him at the Showtime camp, and he was getting coached up a lot during that camp. They spent a lot of time with him. Looks like a kid who's going to continue growing and physically developing, but he's cat quick. He's very springy, very bouncy, and I could definitely see why he is a cornerback that a lot of colleges are very interested in.
He's a coach's kid, so his dad, Highland Springs, is a very good football program up in Virginia. I think Chambers went up there earlier this year from North Carolina and beat them, and they're not used to losing up there. And Braylon's dad is a former Virginia Tech player. So, with the new coaching staff, Coach Pry, that Virginia Tech is going to try their best to keep Braylon Johnson from leaving that state after Mac and his pack of Raiders went up there and got all these top players from North Carolina. But he's a great player. I remember him at the Showtime. He's a Virginia kid, and Mac would love to steal him away, but it's going to be a little bit different now because with the Virginia kids, maybe because of the 2 new coaching staffs at Virginia Tech and Virginia. New staff means new coaches and building relationships and
sales pitches.
Yeah, and so a lot of guys were new. Maybe they didn't know about Bronco, but they kind of possibly knew that Justin Fuente was kind of on the out. So it's going to be interesting monitoring him. I'm sure Carolina will be in his top list, but I'm sure Virginia Tech will be as well.
Funny you say Raiders, because I was just in Las Vegas covering the Carolina basketball game this past weekend, and everywhere you turn is Raiders stuff. And Golden Knights, by the way, the hockey team they have there. So, but it was kind of weird because I hadn't been in Vegas in 2 years. The last time was when Carolina played UCLA there. So you go then, a lot of Golden Knights stuff. Now suddenly there's a lot of Raiders stuff. And suddenly people are Raiders fans here that maybe didn't care about them before. Caleb Downs is someone everybody that follows Carolina football should be familiar with because his brother just set a single season record this year for most receptions and most receiving yards, and he will add to it next week in the bowl game. Caleb is a 4-star safety, 6 foot, 183 pounds from Houston, Georgia, number 24 player nationally in the class, number 1 in his position in the Peach State, the number 3 overall prospect in Georgia, is highly touted as Josh Downs was. I would say that Caleb Downs might be even more highly touted.
And possibly just because his brother doing what he's doing. Great bloodlines. Their dad, Gary, was a standout at NC State. And Caleb certainly knows what goes on at UNC. He's been at Carolina several times to see Tar Heels and watch Josh play. And he's a safety. So Coach Bateman, he's going to make him a priority, but he's a national recruit. And, I hate to say, you get one Downs out of Georgia, it's going to be hard to get the other Downs. I'm pretty sure that Kirby Smart and his staff is going to try their best to keep Caleb Downs in state, but he's got a who's offer list and one of the top kids in the nation. So it's going to be interesting to see if Caleb wants to follow his brother up to Chapel Hill or make his own path somewhere else.
Now, I know that their dad, Gary, didn't play quarterback with the Wolfpack. He was a little bit more physical. In fact, I think he had a neck roll back in the day when he was playing for him. But can you imagine this picture? Christmas Day, the Downs family, they open up their gifts and all that kind of stuff, and they're waiting for dinner to get ready or just holding off. And it's a little kind of nice out. So Dad and his 2 boys go outside, and he says, Josh, run routes. Caleb, you cover him. That ought to be fun.
It would be fun right now.
Yeah, but that's if Dad could get him the ball. So maybe they could find someone else to throw the ball to him. Michael Doherty is a 4-star safety, 6 foot, 175 pounds. Another kid from the state of Georgia, Grayson, Georgia, that is, the number 197 overall prospect nationally in the class, number 12 in his position, number 22 in loaded Georgia. I don't know much about Michael Doherty, so fill me in on him and everybody else that's listening and watching.
He released his top list school. North Carolina was in it, so he's been at UNC. He came up to a game. So anytime a kid takes the time to come up to a game, you have to consider that that Carolina is a legitimate shot of landing this kid. So he makes me think a lot, kind of similar like Caleb Downs. They're a lot same height, same weight, same skill level. So a Georgia kid, Bateman, Jay Bateman has spent a lot of time in Georgia, even with the recruitment with Will Hardy, Coach Lilly, with his recruiting connections when he was at University of Georgia, knowing a lot of the high school coaches. So I guess you've kind of noticed there's a lot of out-of-state prospects that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And that goes to say that not that there's not a lot of high. I think the 23 class in North Carolina is very top heavy, and North Carolina might have to go outside of the state to get some of these kids that they really, really have zeroed in on.
Well, considering the fact that the Tidewater area is part of North Carolina. I guess that could change it if we put an NC next to those kids' names.
Yeah.
Chris Peele, he is from North Carolina. He doesn't need to get an asterisk next to his name to be considered part of North Carolina. He's a 6'2", 180-pound safety from Providence Day in Charlotte, the number 29 kid nationally at his position. The number 11 prospect in North Carolina. We've heard his name for a while. So fill everybody in on what kind of kid, what kind of player he is, and whatever he's got going on with the Heels.
He's really blew up over this fall season. Helped Providence Day to a state title. Plays for Coach Chad Greer, who's making himself a legend down in Charlotte, winning another state title. Got great quickness, athletic. You know, he does it all. Great tackler. Came up to Carolina for a game. He's been at, I believe he was at one of the camps. I think there's been 3 or 4 schools that's been really high into him, including UNC. I know State has been very involved in him, and South Carolina. So right now, those 3 schools are really, I would say, probably at the top of his list right now. Of course, he's still trying to get more interest and offers and everything. But right now, those 3 schools look like the main guys for him right now.
Staying in the Old North State for our final kid we're going to discuss in this podcast, looking at the class of 2023 defensive prospects for UNC. Listed as an athlete, his name is Grant Tucker, 3-star kid, 6'2", 183 pounds, Charlotte Christian. He's number 33 athlete nationally in the class of 23, the number 9 prospect in the class of North Carolina. So what's up with him?
Well, he's definitely an athlete because he's played wide receiver. I think North Carolina might be looking at him at linebacker. He's got skills to play safety as well. So Charlotte Latin right there in that hub that North Carolina wants to keep a fence around. And for you guys that like follow the Carolina Stars, this is a defensive player that plays for the Carolina Stars. I saw him play, and he's a great, terrific kid. One of the first offers, I believe, in the 23 class at North Carolina. One of his first offers in the period, because I remember making his profile in Rivals. So
I remember when that happened too.
So we've been following him a while and keep update. I think he's really high on UNC and think that he would be a great fit for Carolina.
Quick question for you. When you think of a wide receiver, a guy who played wide receiver as well from the Charlotte area, who ended up playing linebacker at North Carolina, who comes to mind? Number
Cedric
33.
Gray.
There you go, Cedric Gray. So that's not a bad place to.
We really didn't know what he was going to play because he was just, and,
he wasn't sure. I mean, he said,
and this staff, it shows these kids, if it don't work out, you can try. I mean, they got one of the biggest stories a couple of years ago in the whole country with Chad Surratt switching from quarterback to linebacker and becoming a 3rd-round draft pick. So, anything's possible. Is when they get them on campus, they want to do what's best for the player, but also the best for the team. And so, Mac praised the 2022 class of being team captains, and most of your team captains are willing to do whatever it takes to win.
Good. And if a kid starts out when he arrives at the position he wants to play, and it doesn't work out, that's okay, because sometimes if a kid comes in and wants to play wide receiver, but you got him at linebacker, and they're playing linebacker, but they want to be at wide receiver, they're thinking kind of hedging in their mind. Boy, I'd rather be there. They're not as happy. But if they want to play wide receiver, they come in and they struggle at wide receiver, and then they move. At least they gave it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have that itch to scratch anymore. And I think that is the kind of thing that would help keep down transfers. Although, to be perfectly honest with you, kids transfer for every reason under the sun now. 3-4 years ago, they weren't transferring for the same reasons because it wasn't as easy to do it. It's a lot easier now for them to do that. But part of the process of letting kids play where they want to is you want your players to be happy. And if they're playing the position that they want to the most and they're excelling, they're going to be very, very happy for the most part. So I think that's part of the method behind that. So wherever he ends up, he's going to be a good football player wherever he ends up, Deana. He's just got that football player vibe. You stick him on defense over there, he's going to make plays. Stick him on offense over here, he's going to make plays.
Well, with like our offensive podcast with the defense as well, we could turn around 3 or 4 months and there might be several new names pop up. Yep. And some of these older names they might have committed to North Carolina or another school. Else. So I'm anxious to compare this podcast to one we possibly will do in 3 or 4 months to see where the Tar Heel stands with these kids at that junction of their.
When we get toward the end of spring practice, we'll do one because we'll learn a lot by which kids, especially assuming everything either stays as open it is now or opens up more. We'll learn a lot about what kids show up and what take in a spring practice, because every time I've been in a spring practice, there are a healthy handful of kids watching. So that'll be the case coming up this spring. Boy, I really enjoy these podcasts, kind of give us a really healthy launch into the class of 2023 taking center stage. If you missed the first podcast, go over there and check it out. It's right here on our YouTube channel. If you're on our site, it's posted on the board or it's on the front page. So click that and watch and listen to all this good stuff from Miss King. She is Deana. I'm AJ. We appreciate you stopping by.